And so I know of no one who wouldn't agree with this statement, that Yellowstone with wolves is dramatically different than without them. In many ways, it can be likened to a rock at the edge of the cliff that's been sitting there for decades, waiting for this release in vegetation to occur. It took wolves to push that rock off the cliff. So having grizzly bears and wolves and cougars back across the American landscape, keeping them in the Canadian and Alaskan landscape, are certainly some of the bigger questions we should be talking about.
These are questions that go beyond the science of top predators to the art of living among them. From the farm country of Minnesota, which has also been wolf country far longer than any place in the lower 48, come encouraging models of coexistence forged in time and patience.
The wolf density in Minnesota is probably the highest density of wolves in the lower 48 states. And currently, our wolf population is at about 3,000 wolves. There's extensive human activity within those areas.
When we were shopping for farms, we were told there would never be wolves here because we're too far south, because we're between two major highways and relatively close to two large towns.
Janet McNally raises sheep on her farm just 2 hours north of the Mall of America, a land lately running with wolves.
In 1991, I heard my first wolf howl. And after I picked my jaw off my chest, I sat there thinking how cool it was, but oh my, what's next? You know, it's like I knew that I was going to have trouble. In '93, we had our first wolf depredation. And then in '99, and in the first 10 days of lambing, we lost 40 lambs.
Currently, there are approximately 8,500 livestock producers in Minnesota's wolf range. In any given year, 70 to 100 of those will be directly impacted by wolf predation. So it turns out that about 1 or 2% of the producers are impacted annually by wolf damage in Minnesota. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's not a huge impact to Minnesota agriculture, but if you're one of the producers in that 1 to 2%, the impacts can be significant if it's your livestock that are being killed by wolves.
We understand that wolves are not cuddly animals. They have big teeth, and they love to eat things. And that's okay, because that's what they're made to do. And along with that, we understand that if we have livestock in an area where there are wolves, we have to protect that livestock. But we don't just protect it by shooting wolves. We protect it with guard dogs, we protect it with fencing, we protect it with good animal husbandry techniques and management techniques to take care of those animals.
Way to me. Misty, Fern, come here. Come on, come on. There's actually two types of dogs we're using here. We're using a border collie whose sole job is to move the sheep around. And then the other dog is the guarding dogs, and the only job they have is just to protect the sheep. They don't move them or anything like that. They are just there to protect them. The most important thing we can do when we're faced with a pack of wolves is to bring the sheep together, to consolidate them and put all the dogs in there with them. We can actually stop wolf depredation overnight. Wait a minute. A third element to this is that we started using electrified netting. And then the last thing is to just keep them moving. We use rotational grazing. It's a part of our grazing management, but we found that when predator populations are high, it's actually a good management tool from the standpoint of preventing depredation too. And it has a twofold benefit. We're managing the forage better, and we're also managing our predator situation better. There's no one thing. You have to do all of these things together to actually stop depredation. That experience in 1999 was the last time we had any wolves kill any sheep.
Because we've had wolves for so long, I think that's one of the reasons why wolf conflicts in Minnesota aren't quite as intense as they are in some areas. People have been around wolves for a long time, whereas when you look to Wisconsin or Michigan, wolves are a little bit newer there, so people aren't as familiar with them. There's more unknowns, and so that can create some concern, fear. And out west, where wolves were reintroduced, there's sort of that same dynamic, as well as the feeling that, you know, the government did this to it. They brought the wolves back. So wolves were always here, even though their numbers were reduced. They were always here, and most people now in Minnesota have, at least in the northern part of the state, have grown up knowing that there's wolves around. So that uncertainty, I think, is not there, that can create some fear in people.
We've had wolves as long as I can remember. Robbie and I took over Parents Farm in the late 70s, 30 years ago. My dad was a shooter. If it looked like a wolf and it was coming in anywhere as near his gun, he shot it, and that's the way it was. And no questions asked. Just deal with it and get it out of the way.
David Radaich, his wife Robbie, and their son Lee raise cattle in the midst of one of the densest populations of wolves in Minnesota. At any given time, there may be as many as 10 wolves within a mile of their farm.
The wolves, I see them, their daily life, running around, follow the tractors, catching mice, and we're making hay, harvesting corn. As soon as they see me, they keep eye contact, but they keep their distance, otherwise they run away.
But there are times when the wolves become more than curious neighbors, when the Radaiches must act to protect their calves. And like Janet McNally, they make adjustments.
We try different management things to keep the wolves at bay. We're feeding our cow herd at night or right before dark, and that delays the cow's birthing process for 5 to 6 hours. And so during the darkest part of the night, we're not having many calves at all. And I think that takes pressure off of our cow herd. And so if we can calve during the daytime, there's usually a little bit more activity going on, and I think the wolves are a little bit more afraid to come out into the open.
Yet even with the Radaiches' vigilance, there come occasions when deterrence fails, when to keep their cattle alive, a wolf must die. A call goes out to the Federal Animal Control Agency, U.S. Wildlife Services.
We try to respond within 24 hours of receiving a complaint. We're only removing wolves in response to depredations. We're not indiscriminately killing wolves across the landscape. And over time, we've developed a level of trust, at least in Minnesota here, with wolf proponents as well as the livestock producers, kind of finding that middle ground.
One of the reasons we have our farm here is because the benefits far outweigh the problems. Raising cattle, growing crops, whether it's wheat or corn or hay, anything has its obstacles, and wolves are just one part of the picture. How many of the people in this country can sit on their patio or look out their picture window and see a wolf run across the yard? Mm-hmm. It's annoying, but it's absolutely beautiful.
Farmers deal with nature every day they step out of the house. And we deal with the weather, we deal with the trees, we deal with the grass, we deal with the animals, we deal with the wolves. They were here before us, and we've just learned to live with them.
I'd say the main goals of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources Wolf Management Plan are to, number one, allow wolves to exist where they may, with no geographic or numeric constraints imposed on the wolf population. The goal, number two, is to manage human-wolf conflicts and address them where they occur. And there will be no public harvest of wolves for the first 5 years following delisting, after which there could be, but it will be based on a lot of public discussion and public comment to decide whether there will be a public harvest of wolves in Minnesota.
Over the past decade, Minnesota's farmers have reached a healthy equilibrium with wolves, founded on vigilance and respect. And that respect extends to another North Country institution, the Minnesota deer hunter.
Deer hunting is a crazy passion here in Minnesota. We have a little over 1 million deer in Minnesota, and every year we have about 500,000 hunters that go into the field chasing those deer. With all the wolves, do we have terrible hunting? The answer is no. Now, there are certain areas of the state, especially in the north central portion of Minnesota, where there are a lot of wolves and a number of packs. Or deer hunting is a little tougher because the deer are a little more wise. They're always on the edge because a predator is looking to eat them. The hunters are going to find, and guides are going to find, that they're going to have to change some of their tactics on where they go and what they do, because the animals are going to change. The prey species, the elk, the deer, are going to be moving more. In a way that leads to, you need to be a better hunter. You need to be a better guide to understand what's going on. Here in Minnesota, there used to be the mentality 30 years ago or 40 years ago, more like 40 years ago, that if you saw a wolf, it was better you shot it and left it, let it die. That mentality isn't here now because we've grown to be accustomed to the wolf, we've grown to understand them more. And I think you're going to see that same learning curve happen in western states. I would hope so, because it is a majestic animal. It does have a place in our natural resources. It does have a place in our environment today.
The West is where the country's tolerance for living with wolves is now facing its greatest test. It is a land of great potential for the large carnivores, big on space and rich with prey. But it is also a land where livestock still rules the open range. It is a land of raw human emotions, infused with fear and distrust, ingrained from generations past.
If I see a wolf, if he's close enough to where he's supposed to be burying my sheep, I'm going to shoot him.
John Faulkner is a third-generation sheepman who runs one of the largest sheep operations in Idaho.